Welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thanks so much for tuning in here on Thursday, January 9th. Again, dealing with a little bit of a cold here, so apologize if my voice is a little scratchy, if I sound a little nasally, what have you. We're playing injured here today, right? But we have got some news that came out yesterday. Jaguars coaching search, it's underway. It is underway. We already had been alerted that Ben Johnson is confirmed to interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars on Saturday. If you want to get more of my take and thoughts on Ben Johnson interviewing with the Jaguars, you can go check out that video. We dropped it yesterday. Right now, we're talking about two other coaching candidates that are confirmed to meet with the Jaguars, interview with the Jaguars. Robert Saleh, former New York Jets head coach, will be interviewing with the Jaguars on Tuesday. Also former Jaguars linebackers coach. And Aaron Glenn, the Detroit Lions defensive coordinator, will be interviewing on Saturday along with Ben Johnson. So you're going to get both Lions coordinators virtually interviewing on Saturday with the Jacksonville Jaguars. We're going to talk about both of those guys here today, Robert Saleh and Aaron Glenn, both of those defensive coaches the Jaguars are going to be interviewing. When you look at the list of coaching candidates that the Jaguars have put together, which you can now add Brian Flores to that list, and we haven't received any word about his potential interviewing with the team. It would probably be next week. There's some very specific rules about the time frame in which you can interview coaches that are coaching playoff teams. So it would probably be next week after the wild card round for Brian Flores, and we'll talk about that at a different time. But Robert Saleh, he's working with the Packers right now, but he was obviously the Jets head coach prior to that, and so he'll meet with the team Tuesday. Aaron Glenn on Saturday. When I look at Robert Saleh, to me, what a strong defensive coach and defensive mind. Like, very, very impressive in what he has done throughout his career as a defensive coordinator and as a defensive head coach. The New York Jets defenses were consistently very good under him. San Francisco 49ers defense is consistently very, very good under him. I think he was their most consistent DC in San Francisco. D'Amico Ryans did a great job as well, obviously. Other than that, you've seen a lot of movement at that DC spot in San Francisco. As far as like full team leadership, solid in my opinion. Not absolutely amazing. I got to see him a lot on Hard Knocks, and I thought there was some strong moments. I thought there was some kind of corny moments as well. But as far as just being able to coach up a defense, there's no question that, in my mind, he can do that at an extremely high level. Again, leading a full organization, more of a question mark for me. I think it's probably fine, but not the absolute best in that regard. I think working in New York under Woody Johnson is much different than working in Jacksonville under Shad Khan. I will say that. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone, honestly, working under Woody Johnson. The guy is a loose cannon. You have no idea what he's going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. So Woody Johnson is the definition of a meddling owner. Shad Khan is whatever the opposite of that is, right? He just kind of lets you do your thing. So, yeah. I think that he would be in a better situation here from like an ownership support standpoint. I think anybody would compared to working in New York for the Jets. Not only do you have like crazy media and fan situation up there in New York, but you have an owner who's off his rocker as well. So I think Robert Saleh would be probably a fallback option for the Jaguars as a head coach. I don't think he's going to be at the top of their list. When you look at the list they've put together, a lot of the names are these offensive coordinator candidates, but you do have Robert Saleh as a defensive guy. You have Aaron Glenn. You have Brian Flores now, and I think there was one other name that was a defensive coach. So it's fairly balanced, but I think I would be surprised if the Jaguars don't land someone who's an offensive coach. I think that's the direction they're leaning in, and the reason is when you're hiring a defensive coordinator or a defensive head coach, what is your plan for Trevor Lawrence? What is your plan for this offense? We have a franchise quarterback. Our previous coach was not able to get the most out of our franchise quarterback and our offense that we spent a lot of money on, a lot of draft capital on. What's your plan? How are you going to get this thing going in the right direction on the offensive side of the ball? Now, do I think that if the Jaguars were able to play more consistent defense, that would help the offense and help this football team just build confidence and win more football games? Absolutely, 100%. And I think Robert Saleh would bring that. Um, but if I'm Shad Khan in this interview, I'm saying, we saw you fire Mike LaFleur. We saw your franchise quarterback flame out. We haven't seen any improvement with the offense. Nate Hackett, Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, Rodgers dealt with the injury last year, but what's the deal there? What's the deal? Explain what happened and how you're going to handle this better, right? But you talk about his defensive schemes and philosophies, where he comes from the cover 3 scheme, Gus Bradley, Pete Carroll, but he adjusts this thing. He's not as dogmatic as Gus Bradley was throughout his tenure as a defensive coordinator and head coach in this league. Obviously, Gus just got fired by the Colts, but he does like to run a 4-man front. I see a lot of wide 9, a lot of 4-man fronts. He'll bring more pressure than Gus Bradley did. He does like to live a lot in cover 1 and cover 3, but he'll play man. He'll get you in 2 high shells as well. He's a forward-thinking defensive coordinator. He does a tremendous job. I think he would do a really good job putting together a great defensive staff as well. I also think when you look at Robert Saleh, I mentioned this earlier this week when we heard the Jaguars were going to interview him. I think that he could also be a strong candidate to be the Jaguars' defensive coordinator, right? You go through this interview process. Maybe he's not the guy for you as a head coach, but you can maybe potentially fall back on him as a DC. As far as DCs goes, he's going to be among the most desired defensive coordinators to fulfill roles in the league. So you're going to have to strike probably pretty quickly if you're going to land him as a defensive coordinator. And he's also going to meet with the 49ers about their defensive coordinator job. So he could just be heading back to San Francisco. That would not surprise me one bit. Robert Saleh, among the coaching candidates, head coaching candidates for the Jaguars, would be a little bit down my list, but would I look at hiring him as an absolute failure? Probably not, assuming we can figure out what's going on the offensive side of the ball, but that's a question for every single defensive-minded head coach. Got to remind y'all, before we talk about Aaron Glenn, to check out Underdog Fantasy. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward, and signing up is even easier. You just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with promo code DuvalDaily, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. Maybe you think Justin Herbert, CJ Stroud will pop off in that first playoff game. You make the call. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code DuvalDaily to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP. 1-800-639-8783 or text next step to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8 Hope and Y or text Hope and Y 467-369. So, Aaron Glenn, he will meet with the Jets, Saints, Bears, and Jaguars about their head coaching jobs. I would be shocked if he doesn't get a head coaching job this cycle. He has experience as a coach on the Saints staff. He spent a lot of time with the Saints, played there a little bit, and then again was there for 5 seasons as a defensive assistant. He spent a lot of time playing in New York for the Jets. He also has been a year in Jacksonville playing with the Jaguars. So he's got connections across these franchises. It feels like he's probably going to be the next head coach of the Jets or the Saints, which I don't think are 2 of the more desirable jobs. In fact, I think the opposite, but we'll see how it ends up playing out with Aaron Glenn. He's meeting with a lot of these teams. I think he's going to be a head coach next year. Glenn, like I said, he did have a cup of tea here in Jacksonville as a player. Very useful part of that 2007 playoff team, cornerback, playing with Rasheem Mathis and all those guys under Jack Del Rio. Extensive coaching resume. Browns assistant DB coach from 2014 to 2015. Saints DB coach 2016 to 2020, Lions defensive coordinator 2021 to present. Growth has been linear for him. Went from the Browns assistant defensive back coach, very quickly became a Saints DB coach, right? And then rose from DB coach to defensive coordinator. It's not like he's been fired. Every single movement from him has been upwards, right? Has been vertical. So that's good to see, obviously. I mean, he's done a tremendous job during his time in the league as a coach. He took over a really bad Lions defense in 2021, and now they're one of the best. And you want to talk about a team that's dealt with injuries? The Jaguars deal with injuries. They've dealt with injuries the last couple years a lot, right? Detroit Lions, Aiden Hutchinson, injured reserve. Aleem McNeil, injured reserve. Carlton Davis, injured reserve. Kaminsky, IR. Pecco, IR. Malcolm Rodriguez, IR. Barnes, IR. Mosley, out. No excuses. They're still playing good football on that side of the ball, and that's just incredibly impressive to me from Aaron Glenn. And he likes to play aggressive man cover schemes. He'll mix it up plenty. He is forward thinking. He will game plan defense. Like, it's not just like this is what we do and we're going to stick to it. He will game plan defense, no doubt about it. And as far as leadership goes, I mentioned I think Robert Saleh leadership is, fine, but nothing to get fired up about. I think Aaron Glenn is the number one candidate in my book as a leader, just a leader of men. The way he communicates on the sideline, whenever you watch his press conferences, whenever you hear mic'd up, he's fantastic. Aaron Glenn is a true leader. He played in the NFL for a long time, so he can relate to these guys a little bit better than some others. So he's the number one leader in my book, and he's, I think, my third favorite as the top head coaching candidate this cycle behind Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen. And the only reason he's behind those guys is because if you have a franchise quarterback, you got to have that plan in place. And so the question with Aaron Glenn would be the same question with Robert Saleh. How do you handle the offensive situation? How do you hire your offensive coordinator? What are you doing on the offensive side of the ball to make sure Trevor Lawrence is able to continue to progress? My other question for both of these guys, maybe you have a good plan in year one for offensive coordinator. What if you have a strong year and your offensive coordinator gets poached? How do you handle that speed bump? Because that's going to be critical. If you hire someone and they have success, the offense does a good job, Trevor Lawrence makes progress, that offensive coordinator is going to be a hot candidate. Bottom line, how do you handle replacing him? Are you going to replace from within? Are you going to have an expansive search? How are you going to make sure that the offense stays forward thinking, stays unpredictable, as Sean Conn would like to say, right? Like, these are big time questions for anybody running the defense. And if you're picking somebody to be an offensive head coach as well, you have to answer the same questions about the defense. But for me, the most paramount thing for the Jacksonville Jaguars is making sure the offense gets back on track and Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. are able to thrive in this ecosystem. So that's what I'm looking at. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. Let me know what you think in the comment section below about Robert Saleh, Aaron Glenn. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. You can also check out genjag.com/shop. Pick up some new Duval gear like the hat I am wearing right now. Become a channel member here on YouTube. Y'all have a good one.